Hello, and welcome back to Between the T's, the knowledge sharing program from Texas Bank and Trust. I'm your host, Karen Partee. Today, we continue our discussion of small business financing with Senior Vice President and Commercial Lending Officer, Mr. James Sheridan. In our first segment, we discussed common misconceptions of putting together a strong loan application for small business owners. And today, we want to carry that discussion further by looking at some pitfalls that small business owners may face in the financing process. So, James, I know in your 26 years of being a commercial lender, we've talked before, you've probably seen a myriad of businesses. Some succeed from getting that first loan, and then some still struggling. What are some pitfalls that kind of are common between both of them? What distinguishes between who succeeds and who doesn't?
Sure. So, very commonly, we touched on this a little bit about the application process. Along with that internal review of our personal finances before we endeavor to start a business, we want to make sure we have enough capital, because the bank is going to ask you to make not only an injection, if, for example, if it's a building purchase or an equipment purchase,
right,
but you also want to have some capital available to put into the business as far as just everyday working capital. The businesses, typically, if they sell on terms, they won't collect their money 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, etc.
Yeah.
But that business generates bills essentially every day. You
right.
have payroll, you have electricity, insurance, and things like that. And so it's critical to have that cash on hand or that capital on hand to get you to the point to where those receivables are collected if you sell on terms. And so a lot of folks may have the initial injection to put down on the collateral, which would be equipment,
right,
building, etc. But it would be difficult to get a loan if we realized that they had totally exhausted all those resources. And so you want to have a plan for not only putting some skin in the game, as
right,
we say, but also to have some working capital to carry you through as you're collecting your money from your customers. And that's one pitfall.
Well, let me stop you right there.
Sure.
I know every business is different in terms of the size and the revenue that they bring in. Is there a percentage of capital that you're looking for when businesses come in seeking that financing?
Sure. What we like to see typically, and it's different by different asset types, but typically a good sort of overarching figure is about 20%.
Okay.
If you have about 20% of your money to inject into the
Absolutely.
project, and then whatever working capital, I would suggest from a working capital standpoint, when you prepare your initial budget, if you had, say, 3 to 4 months of operating income available to cover those expenses until your business starts to stabilize and you get your revenues coming in on a regular basis.
Okay.
And so just a general point on that would be 20% injection of equity, and then have 3 to 4 months of expenses on hand as part of your budget.
Okay.
That's a good, that would make us feel comfortable from a lender's perspective that you've planned for this. Another pitfall would be we want you to make sure that you've done your research, and I think this is very timely at this point, because as we all know, the retail business landscape has changed tremendously.
Right.
The online retailers
Absolutely.
have really sort of started to push a lot of those traditional retailers out of business. And so I think the retail businesses that seem to succeed and thrive are niche businesses. And so I think it's very critical and very important as you're looking to start a business that if it is a retail business, you're servicing a certain market segment or certain niche that perhaps someone like an Amazon or a Walmart,
right,
they can't really compete directly with you. I think if you're trying to compete on a retail scale with one of those mass online retailers, it's probably, number one, we probably wouldn't approve a loan, but we would do that because it's probably not a good project for you as well.
Right.
So that's another pitfall. I would say the third pitfall, believe it or not, that I see is, sometimes we talk about the business startup and getting going, and then the business gets going. One thing that's very critical to the business is once that business stabilizes and it does start to cash flow, that you make sure you're putting money back into the business. What you don't want to do is once the business stabilizes, starts to generate cash flow, you need to take a reasonable salary for yourself to provide for your household expenses.
right,
But put the money back into the business. And when I say put the money back into the business, I mean build a cash reserve. Again, if you had 6 months of expenses cash reserve, that's good.
right.
And then also for the debt, if you can start to accelerate the repayment, I know as a banker that's kind of counterintuitive,
Right.
but we would like to see that paid back aggressively or ahead of time, because in the end it's going to save you on your interest expense as well. And so that's what I talk about when the business stabilizes. don't take too much out of it. Put the money back into the business, because ultimately, at some point, you would like to be debt-free, and so you don't have that debt overhead every month as well.
And as a community banker, you have an opportunity to sit down and actually have these involved discussions with small business owners, you know, to talk them through these pitfalls.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely.